Hi there, welcome back to the Community of Readers video blog. We're following the Old Testament readings for the Monkey Bar Challenge, and this week we're looking at the book of Esther. This is called Ink on Our Fingers. Well, we're nearly at the end of our Old Testament readings, but suddenly here we discover this gem from the diaspora, the Jews who've been scattered through the region as a result of the exiles. We read of Esther's prevention of an ethnic cleansing, and we find a new hope, one that will shape Israel's legends for years to come. Esther is a different kind of story because this is only 50 years after the return from exile, and yet no mention of it is made. Now, this was such a seismic moment to come back from Babylon to settle in Yehud, the Persian province, later called Judea. This is what we've been reliving for the last few months. And only 50 years later, it's not mentioned. What's going on? Well, what we have to imagine, and I guess what Esther suddenly opens our minds to realise, is that it's been 100 years since the exile happened, and there are Jews who are fifth generation living in Persia. This is in the citadel of Susa in Persia, and actually this is home. They don't share the dreams of the Zionists who club together to imagine, whilst in Babylon they are living a totally different kind of faith, finding roots to prosperity and influence in a new kind of world, working out a new kind of faith in a land that they now call home. When they look back to the land from which they were scattered, they just see a backwater Persian province. They don't have it rosy in the citadel of Susa, but in Yehud they would be in less stable conditions in a much harder economic circumstance. Life in the citadel of Susa right now makes sense. And yet here's a story where they have to face the reality of annihilation. And though this faith is different, there is still something alive here, something very alive. It's been noted about Esther that Yahweh is never mentioned. He's not consulted, he's not invoked. There's no mention of Yahweh's purpose or judgment or testing, any of the themes, no, not his liberation. None of the stuff that we've come to associate with thinking about Yahweh and his relationship with Israel. And yet, behind the tale stalks the divine personality. Mordecai states his committed belief that were salvation for the Jews not to have come through Esther, it would have come another way. And when the decree for the annihilation is read out, all of the Jews in the citadel of Susa fast, putting their faith into action in ritualized plea. And so we're living here in a different kind of Jewish faith. The inspiration of Esther and Mordecai is the trial of those who would have the courage to put themselves on the line when the moment comes. And it's inspiring. It's inspiring for a new imagination for the people of God, for those who were scattered, and there were loads of them, loads of Jews scattered throughout the region. The story of Esther, much like the story of Daniel, shows that success in a foreign place, in a land far from home, is doable. Faith can flourish without Jerusalem. In our post-Christian Western world, where religion is no longer defined as a national institution, Esther somehow makes a bit more sense to us instinctively. It feels more contemporary. And yet, although we have been permitted this brief sabbatical from Jewish nationalism that we've had so much over the last few months in the prophets, this is still a very definitely Jewish story. One where, at the end, in another of these moments that they never told you in Sunday school, the end of Esther describes violence and the celebration of violence against the enemies of the Jews. Every one of us has some position of influence in our local communities or our workplace. Who knows that we have come to this position for such a time as this? Esther inspires us to seize course-changing, history-shaping moments with courage and resolve, but also to recognise the immense responsibility that brings. If our tribal loyalties get the better of us, we may well end up with ink on our fingers by signing away policies, checks, contracts that discriminate. We risk the contemporary, everyday, very ordinary version of blood on our hands.